All right, this is part two where I'm going over what I know about goals. I have a bunch of writing on this slide, so I'll go through it first. If you're unsure about how to make or measure progress, if you're trying to achieve a goal and you sit there and you feel stuck, if you're unsure about how to make or measure progress, or unsure about which actions towards a goal will be helpful, and those are similar things. You're trying to progress towards a goal, you feel uncertain, or maybe you've been working towards a goal. Well, let's imagine that you're trying to make money online. And so you're unsure, do I make a website? Do I try to pay for people to come to visit my site with advertisements? Do I try to rank on Google? Do I try to do some other method of getting people to my website? Do I make a YouTube video? And let's say that it's been a few months and you've been working on trying to make money online and you're not sure if you've made progress or not. Plenty of people do make money within a few months of trying to make money online, but plenty of people don't yet make money. And so then there could be the question of, am I really making any progress? Same thing can happen if you're trying to get a relationship, make a relationship with someone else, or a romantic relationship, and you haven't done it yet and you're not sure if you're making progress on that or what to do next. Okay, so I just read the first part of what was in the slide, which is about being unsure. Then the next part of the slide says understanding is always helpful. I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt myself for a second. I'm probably seeing this elsewhere, but I'm reading this just in case people listen to this on an MP3. It's good for me to be a little bit clear about what's on a slide. All right, so understanding is always helpful and always leads to good. So this is the punchline of the slide, that understanding is what's always helpful. And I'll try to get into exactly what I mean by understanding in a moment. So understanding is always helpful, I wrote, and always leads to good if we stipulate that the goal leads to good. So when I put that last part, if we stipulate that the goal leads to good, understanding might not lead to good if what you're understanding is about something irrelevant. So our brain, remember, twists the meaning of good to mean that which furthers its goals. And of course, an evil villain in a movie might think it's good if the hero gets hurt or gets killed, right? So that doesn't mean it's actually good, but the brain twists in that way. And so I just took care of that issue by just stipulating that in this case, a goal, we'll just presume that pursuing a goal is good and then making progress is good. And we're not going to worry about that for the sake of this slide and for the sake of this discussion, right? Elsewhere, you can worry about whether your goals themselves are worth pursuing or not. And we talk about that in plenty of places. But in this slide, we're not going to worry about whether a goal is worth pursuing. We're just going to stipulate that it is for the sake of this discussion. Okay, so with all of that aside, and then I have one more thing to read, but I'll get to that in a second. The key here then, once we kind of brush aside some of the details that I used to clarify, the key is that understanding is constantly going to be, is like old reliable. It's always going to be helpful. And if you've gained understanding over, let's say, making money online for the last few months, then you've made progress. And the same thing with creating a romantic relationship or anything else. So it's often a good way to measure your progress for a while. Remember, I talked about in the previous video how it's good for you to have some sort of exit strategy, or just have the idea that you're never going to exit a goal. You'll just keep on pressing forward to try to achieve it. And maybe it won't take all of your time, but maybe you'll just keep on trying to make progress when it comes up in your life. And so something like trying to make money online for yourself or creating a nice romantic relationship, those aren't really things you necessarily have to exit, because the overhead costs of making money online are so low. It's not like you have a brick and mortar store that you're paying rent on and so forth. Generally, you could just keep on working towards that and make either a side or a full replacement income for yourself. Since I started trying to make money online 10 years ago, I've been able to make an income that I could live off of the entire time. So that is possible. And it can lead to, and then if it's something that you really master and get to understand very well, then you can make, the ceiling is so high, it doesn't really exist, basically. You can keep on making more and more. But this has helped me very much consistently in life to understand how to get started and how to feel like it's okay, not giving up and so forth. And also just how to do the right things that are really help. And so if you're not sure how to go forward with a goal and you want to be spending time going forward on it, then just pick anything that'll help increase your understanding. So most anything that you try to do is going to help, whether you're doing some learning or whether you're taking action. Now, an objection or a confusion can come up if you wonder, David, shouldn't you take action at some point? And certainly, but we can understand that still in context of the idea that understanding is always going to be helpful. And then I'll read what I wrote in the last part of the slide here. I wrote this in parentheses, taking action is a way to gain understanding and should be done as part of the feedback loop early and often, unless it could lead to disaster. So, of course, if you're going to go hang gliding or send a rocket with astronauts to the moon, then you want to have extremely good understanding before you start, so you're quite safe. However, if you're going to be one of the things you might want to have to do is approach or talk to women that you've never talked before, could be online, right? Which makes it easier, which is the thing that I did. Primarily, I also talk to people in real life, so to speak, but in person. But you want to start doing stuff in real life, right? Taking action. You want to just start talking to people, and and by the way, this applies to this course itself. Right now, while I'm making these videos, I made the first 16 videos of the core training series, and I may even go through, it might be possible that when I go through those again, I might adjust some of them or redo some of them, although they're in quite a good form as they are. But I made sure that I'd done a certain number of videos, but then I released this law of implication product on kind of a small scale and to people that knew me pretty well from my teaching business from omgmachines.com. And then I continued to create the product. I'm making this video now with it already open. So it helps me to gain understanding. So I gain understanding by actually making videos. I also gain understanding by having people in the product giving me feedback. But it's not going to lead to disaster. It probably wouldn't anyway, but at least I don't have affiliates and so forth making thousands and thousands of new customers where if it wasn't particularly ready, or it might just become overwhelming dealing with that rather than just making the content, I wouldn't be able to focus as well. So I'm careful about trying to have stepping stones and have a feedback loop that starts on a relatively small scale in many cases. But it is important to take action. So once I got it up and running, or once I got a decent amount of stuff in there, then I just made it live and get the feedback loop going. Feedback loops, of course, is great to set up, and specifically a feedback loop between taking action and then reflecting and maybe gaining knowledge. So this is a good point to point out something that I plan to point out, which is that knowledge and understanding are different. First of all, taking action is part of gaining understanding. My sense of understanding involves building or maybe creatively interacting with what you're trying to understand and building it for yourself. It could be in your mind where you walk through the steps carefully of what's going to go on rather than just picture highlights and pieces of information. But you're building either in your mind or in real life. I gain knowledge. Let's see here. Making these videos is particularly helpful and eye-opening to me. I'm particularly needing to build the law of implication course and the training of it. When I'm doing that, it greatly accelerates my ability to see what's missing in my own understanding, or see what I need better examples of, or see where I need to pause and stop and figure out to explain better, and so forth. It's also going to, of course, make me much more able in the future when I do interviews or webinars, particularly to new people that don't have it yet, to market the product. I'll be a lot more glib. I'll be a lot better at explaining. So if the goal is to be able to explain the law of implication better, then we could think of what I'm working on in my notebook and so forth. We can look at that as making some progress. Some of it's like knowledge as opposed to understanding regarding explaining the law of implication itself, because I'm just writing stuff down in my notebook that when I'm trying to, if the goal is to be able to explain it well in a live setting or not in person necessarily, but live on a radio or webinar or something, then I need to take action, explain it like in these videos. I could also at some point take action and be doing live things even before I'm perfect. But once I'm doing something live, it'll be pretty important to do a fairly good job, especially depending on the scale. And so by doing these videos, but that's not the only thing. Then I do want to step back and do some sort of reflection, listen to the videos, and then do some notebook work and so forth. So you have a feedback loop between reflection, maybe doing some either notebook work or reading something from other people, and taking action. I've followed a rule since discovering this stuff that I found extremely helpful, which I call the understanding. I just paused and drew an arrow here. And it's quite a simple idea, and possibly a slight oversimplification, but it's very helpful. It certainly works to a large degree. And this is just an arrow going to the right. And if you imagine this is your understanding regarding achieving a particular goal about a particular topic, then the greater your understanding, the better results you're going to get. So it's a great way to measure progress. If you measure progress with other sorts of results, if you're trying to make money online and you see some money coming in, it might not even be nearly as good a measure of your actual progress as the understanding line itself. If you measure understanding, that could be more correlated to how far you really are along. Because maybe you're stuck on doing something that'll make you money that isn't really going to go anywhere. And so you're making money, but it might end and you might feel dejected if that's your only way of measuring it. Same thing with dating. Then you can feel like you're making progress. You get a couple dates, or maybe you start dating someone and then it all blows up and then you feel like maybe you didn't make progress. And so that's why measuring things in that way can be discouraging. But measuring with the understanding line is constantly encouraging and accurate, right? There's nothing false about it. It's actually often more true, more accurate, while also being more encouraging. So hopefully that can really help you to measure things in that way. I've had a great benefit to my life and to just feeling encouraged to continue to seek a goal by thinking of things this way in terms of understanding. And I just thought of one last warning I want to give you regarding understanding. Generally speaking, again, there's all a little bit of an oversimplification, possibly, but not much. So along those lines it's worked for me pretty well, keeping this a little bit oversimplified for myself. Presumably it'll work even better. Maybe I'll do some investigating in this and come up with something that I'm even more confident is perfect. But still, again, the oversimplification, I'm going to give you another one that's related, which is that knowledge is stuff that could be false. Like you're reading something in a book, you're being taught something, or you're getting training about making money online, and it may or may not be correct. Understanding is more of the nature of something you've built that can't really be false. And be careful about coming to conclusions, even based on your own experience, that could be false. If you try, doing something with making money online, like making a YouTube video and it doesn't work out very well, or if you're trying to pay for advertising, you don't make money that way. If you make a generalized conclusion about a trend that doesn't really exist, you can't make money doing it that way, then now your own conclusion is off too. You didn't come to an understanding that you can't do something in the future. You can't understand a future trend, positive or negative. And positive trends can be wrong too, right? If you do something and it works a couple of times in a row, or even a few times in a row, it doesn't mean that sometimes people start thinking that they're invincible, right? Or that if you're making $5,000 or $10,000 a month and people start spending money immediately, like they're making that much money, they might even have not made that much money in the past, forgetting about taxes and even go into debt that way. So be careful about extrapolating conclusions. I've talked about this elsewhere about the future and calling those incorrect conclusions. Understanding is more like you understand how you built what you built and it only applies to the exact conditions that you've succeeded in. However, in every way that what you've done, let's say you wrote a sales letter and made sales, it doesn't mean that any time that you write a sales letter in the future that you're going to automatically make sales. And so what you want to do is realize that the perfect understanding is related to just that exact situation with the exact details that it had. And then you've gained understanding that'll be applicable to other situations in as much as those situations are analogous to what you're doing. And so you want to be careful and not get blindsided if a future situation is different, or to the extent that a future situation is different. Understanding is still incredibly beneficial, even if it's just specific to the situation at hand, because there's plenty of things that are analogous. Just be very careful that when you do the next sales letter or date the next person, that you don't just think that they're the same as the previous one. Okay, use your understanding, but not your false or over confident. So don't get confused about what's understanding and what isn't. When you understand one thing, it doesn't mean you understand every analogous situation, every situation that isn't the same as it, right? What's an analogy? It's something that is similar, but inherent within the definition of the analogous situation is that it also is not similar. So just because you understand the original situation, it follows that you necessarily don't perhaps understand some things about something that's different. So be careful of that. Okay, I'm going on to the next slide. I'll finish up this slide in this video, and then in the final video, I will talk about something that I mentioned the first that I would talk about, which is the goal to like yourself and learning how to fully drop that and seeing the incredible benefits to learning how to, and then the benefits to dropping that goal. I'm excited about sharing that with you, and I'll do that in another video. Okay, but back to this. I'm also excited about this slide. It's just this one and then the final one, and that'll be the last video that I showed you about liking yourself. Okay, I have a lot of writing on this slide as well. And what I wrote here is that if you have a goal about what you want someone else to do, so this slide's all about goals regarding someone else doing something or changing or just performing some action that you want or whatever. If you have a goal about what you want someone else to do, it is far more effective to focus on understanding where they are than to focus on where you want them to be. And I'll just go through and read the rest of the slide so I don't have to worry about that. I'm reading now what I wrote. Also, be very careful about modeling. Modeling has a few different meanings. And in this case, what I mean by modeling is that you are a model for however you think and behave and for the people around you. And what that means is you're influencing other people to subconsciously, in essence, to think and act the way that you act. And people often overlook how important that is. It's pretty obvious when it comes to children, but people even overlook it there, right? Do as I say, not as I do, and so forth. Especially because our subconscious, or excuse me, our entire brain doesn't really give us a clear awareness of what all the implications are of our actions and our thoughts. And of course, it's the implications of our actions and thoughts that get communicated. We often find out those implications the hard way, and when people start treating us in a way that surprises us, or they start acting in a way that surprises us. All right, I said I was going to read the whole slide, and then I got stuck here on the word modeling. So modeling means that you are always influencing other people to think and act like you do. Of course, they're doing the same back to you. And that influence can be greater or less, depending on whether the person sees you as a peer, depending on whether the other person's brain is less sure about whatever it is that they're copying from you. People will copy more from their peers in places where they have less certainty. Certainty is not the same as understanding. Certainty is just something that's encoded in a brain. All right, so be very careful about modeling, about the influence you have, that your own thoughts and actions and deep assumptions and implicit meanings of what you're doing and saying. And then now I'm going to continue reading. I wrote seeking understanding, humility, respect, and activity. So if you want someone else to I'm now contradicting what I said I would do about reading. Actually, let me stop doing that. I'll just keep reading the rest of the slide and then I'll explain. All right. After I wrote, also be careful about modeling. And then I wrote underneath that, seeking understanding, humility, respect, and activity. I wrote also, pay careful attention to whether you are perceived as an us or a them. And then finally, I wrote, let go and relax regarding feeling bad or rushed about the goal of changing someone else or having them do something. Okay, I'll skip around a little bit so I can finish explaining about modeling, and then I'll go up to the top line. What you do want to model, if you want them to change or do whatever, then and it doesn't have to be change. It could just be that you want them to do something with you tonight or whatever, or you want them to perform some task if they're a business partner of yours or anything like that. Of course, this doesn't apply to things that are simple where you just ask them to do something and they do it, right? Then you don't need my advice. You just ask them to do it and they'll do it. But there's plenty of times we want someone to do something, or we're thinking that we want someone to do something. We don't know how to get them to do it, or we just want them to change regarding a certain thing. We could drop that altogether, of course. So I'm also excluding for now things where we could just drop this goal of wanting someone to change it. If you're in a romantic relationship with someone, you don't want a lot of things you want them to change. And even if there's something that you'd want them to change, you want to accept them for the way they are until they do. It just might be an opportunity-based thing. So that relates to the last thing I wrote here at the bottom, where let go and relax regarding feeling bad or rushed about a goal. You don't want to be in a relationship with someone and then sit around constantly being upset about something that is a normal behavior of theirs. You need to accept it or get out of the relationship. And accept it is mainly what I'm talking about. It's absolutely crazy to be in a relationship with someone and yet not accept something predictable about that. However, you can accept it, but still look at it as an opportunity to have it get even better. And if you do that, though, just relax, right? But you can still accomplish it, and you can accomplish it the way I'm saying here. So you want to model, in this case, seeking understanding, which you're probably getting pretty good at with this whole law of implication course, right? You want to really understand what's actually true and good. That's what I mean by seeking understanding. And also seeking understanding about what someone else means rather than what you think they mean, things like that. All right. So you're constantly trying to understand things rather than jump to conclusions. You want to understand, then you want to check to make sure you understand before you judge. And then once you're judging, you only want to judge what you're going to do about that anyway. You want to model humility. Humility doesn't mean that you say that you don't know something that you do, but there's one of the great things about the law of implication and the ability to know what's true is you can stop thinking that all sorts of things are true that you don't know are true. See, when you don't know how to know properly how anything is true, then your brain needs to have this whole category of stuff that you know is true that you don't know for sure. And because it needs to have some basis for which to act, right? And so you need to have this artificial method of knowing what's true. People think sometimes that you would get even more arrogant, or they don't think this after I explain things to them, but before they get started, they might think, oh, won't someone be even more arrogant if they know for certain how to know what's true? No, you can become a lot less arrogant because you can drop all of the certainty about all sorts of things being true that you actually don't know whether they're true or not. And you can have a whole category for there's certain things that are reasonable to act upon the belief and so forth, but you don't know for certain that they're true or not. So humility is not pretending like you're not good at something that you are good at, right? Or that sort of thing. It's just things that you don't know, including about the future or how good you're going to do something about the future. I am pretty secure financially now, but I don't know what the future is going to hold. So I don't walk around spending a lot of money or thinking that I'm big stuff or anything like that. I'm happy about achieving a goal that I've achieved, or particularly I'm happy just about being fairly comfortable right now and being able to do what I want rather than what I don't want to do. But then just not, generally speaking, feeling certain about the future is you can't really, that's not really true, right? You can reasonably predict plan on certain things happening in the future, but you don't need to be arrogant about it. Respect is something I'll get into in other places. And I'm pretty certain I use it as an example in the core training. But of course, showing respect and of course, seeking to understand what someone else means and being humble. These are all respectful things as well. And activity, what I mean is that a good example of this is sometimes people have the dream, they think they can hire a bunch of employees or even have business partners and stuff and then not do much. Like this happens a lot in the world of wanting to make money online. But really, you're going to be strongly influencing other people to take action and focus and work at the level that you are. And so be very careful in life about modeling inactivity or that you don't have to work and so forth. If you're around people that you want them to be taking action and working and helping your business. If you want someone to think, then be thoughtful and think through things yourself. If you want someone to go out with you or have energy to do, then you want to have energy as well. If you're a woman and you want more romance, then being more energetic or at least proactive, I don't know, energetic, whatever, regarding just sex can be helpful, right? So if you want them to be active in some area that just literally involves physical effort or doing either work or just going out, then putting forth some energy and in general is you're modeling that activity, and that'll increase the energy level of people around you generally. Okay, let's go up to what I wrote here in the beginning. It's pretty easy to keep in mind what you want someone to be doing, right? That comes easy to you. And so you don't have to really worry about forgetting about that. You don't want to forget about what you want them to do altogether, but that's pretty easy. So the main thing you want to do is focus on where they are right now. Now, maybe I should temper this a little bit. Maybe I should even erase the word far when I say it's far more effective. It's separately true that being in the right mental state yourself can be key. But even then, actually, the mental state that you want to be in is the one needs to really match I'll give an example. It'll help you to say, let's say you're a guy, you're going on a date. And as you're going on that date, you're thinking how much you want them to come back home and have sex with you. Then focusing on that is going to be particularly ineffective. And you're going to not really be understanding very well where they're at and what they're saying. You're not going to be paying very much attention. If you really come across in a whole number of ways. Now, and if I would say something a little bit funny, but weirdly true, is remember where you want them to be is you want to think about this at least from their perspective. So if you want them to have sex with you, then if you're picturing that you want to have sex with them, then that's not where you want them to be anyway. So I wrote this maybe a little bit sloppily or something. Not really. I wrote it in a way that the meaning isn't exactly obvious. Perhaps that's sloppily, perhaps it's not. But keep in mind that I could have said that, and keep in mind that what you're picturing might not be where you want them to be at all. At least it needs to be from their perspective, right? So again, if you want her to have sex with you, then you need to imagine that being something that is fun and attractive, right? And having sex, which might seem a little odd, but that's still the truth, right? And if you want someone to buy your product, then if you're picturing how you want them to buy your product, or you're imagining how much money you'll make if they buy, or if you're scared that they won't buy, then that's a problem too. So really the way I should have phrased this is what you want to do is you want to focus from their perspective. You want to imagine them taking the action. But I've already covered this when I talked about focus, desire, faith, and results and so forth, where you want to picture what the world would look like after your goal is achieved. So if your goal is either one of those things, you picture what happened right after they perform the action you want, like buying your product or coming home with you. And that's fine. But then once you've done that, then you need to acknowledge reality, right? And get a good sense of where the person's at, and think of it like leading them through a maze. If you need to lead someone through a maze, or if someone calls you and they need directions driving somewhere, then you have to find out where they are, right? To start with. Sure, you need to know where they need to get to, and notice that it won't help them get there if you get the destination wrong either. Right? So if you're going on a date with someone, you want to drop thoughts, you want to have you can have not even the end goal in mind, but what happens right after the goal. You want to picture that, it gets installed in your brain. And then something I just realized as I'm saying this is that the examples I'm picking, because this is when this applies, is where the end goal is pretty clear to you. And you're also having an issue here, breaking it down into kind of sub goals, because it's not an easy goal for you to achieve. If any of these are super easy, then you don't need any of what I'm writing here. You just go do it, right? And so if you don't know how to achieve a goal, you need to break it down into steps, right? Into kind of sub strategies or sub goals, like stepping stones. And so once you do that, if you get the stepping stone, you can mostly drop. You don't want to be focusing on the final end result, like they come home with you or the customer buys. You can let that go once some stepping stones. So if people aren't going to buy very easily off a direct sales letter, then you might want to try to get their email and then talk to them from there. If you're doing a sales letter, you might be trying to do it all in one fell swoop. But still there can be stepping stones in terms of where the journey that the potential customer is taking as they read through the sales letter or as they watch the sales letter video. They're still going on a bit of a journey. So you can imagine, what do I want first, right? I want them to feel the problem and to identify the problem that I'm going to try to solve with my product. There's a general strategy for writing sales letters called problem, agitate, solve, where first you want them to be aware of the problem, then you want them to feel the problem even more deeply, and then you want to provide the solution to the problem. So now you're breaking it up into steps rather than just thinking how you want them to buy. If you're going on a date and you want the person to come home with you, then you can drop the final goal of them coming home with you. And first, if they feel like you get them and that you both have a connection and you both understand each other and that you're attentive and so forth, then is going to be a terrific stepping stone, right? So you can get there first, and it's going to interfere if you're busy focusing on the final result. See, the thing that all this has in common is right now we're talking about goals where you want someone else to do something. Because that's the case, it's different than other goals in the sense that there's a communication issue. And when you're communicating, you really need to be able to not be distracted and not be projecting onto people. And so you need to be able to drop your other goals to the best you can and really be clear-minded, and not just clear-minded in the sense of you don't have other goals that are in the forefront of your mind that are pulling on you at all or distracting you, including what I'll talk about in the next video, which is the goal to like yourself is a huge distraction, right? It's a huge distracting goal. So you want to be able to drop all those goals and have real communication with the other person, really see where they're at. And they might not even say that much to you if you're just paying attention. Also, if you just walk through what you know about the person, walk through their day leading up to, even if you don't know what their day was like, you can imagine it. And you'll realize all sorts of things about the person. I walked through what it was like for my wife to go shopping, because the way that she went about shopping was so alien to me as the final result that it didn't make any sense. When I shop, I want to go into a store, get what I want, and leave in most every case, unless there are a few times when I shop like her, which is when they used to have Blockbuster Video open. Unfortunately, they're all closed now. But I would maybe just go in and browse, and I would enjoy looking at various movies that had come out. And I would keep up on what was there. Or with video games, I might do that as well. Look through. But with clothes, I just go in and get what I wanted and leave. So between asking myself, are there any cases when I would see her doing it with the mall, where she would just look in and leave and so forth, and really take a long time process and have this kind of multi-step process of shopping? First of all, I would say, are there any places? First, it would seem ridiculous, but then I would say, wait a second, are there any times when I do something like that? And then I would remember that is actually how I would shop for movies or video games. And then separately, I just imagine being her and imagine doing her. I imagine actually physically looking like her, having her body. And then I imagine doing the actions that she would do. And then it made much different sense to me how she likes to perform reconnaissance, right? And see what's out there and so forth. She once said something fairly early on when I knew her. We were in Russia, and we were in a store, and we were in a shoe store. There was all these shoes on all the shelves. And she looked around, and then she looked at me, and totally with a straight face, like it made perfect sense to her, which it did. She said, "Oh, I guess it's not the season for shoes." And it was such an alien statement to me. I find it very funny even now to think about it. But I just look around, there's all these shoes, and she looks at them, and she looks at them. She said, "I guess it's not the season for shoes." But to understand that, you have to get in their shoes, so to speak, and really just walk through, imagine that you're them, and the physically part is a shortcut to help get your brain primed and thinking about things from their perspective. Just kind of, and then imagine performing their actions, and then think why you're doing that, and so forth. So it doesn't have to be not only does it have to be, but this isn't about just like grilling the person. You don't want to put them to the third degree or make it like an interview either. Let me remind you also, you're on a date or something and someone asks you a question, they don't even necessarily want a much of an answer to. They might be asking, if you put yourself in their shoes once again, or imagine being them, don't just put yourself in their shoes, put yourself in their whole body. And they might just be being polite. Maybe they don't want a whole big answer to something that they ask you. Okay, final thing for this video and this slide is I say, pay careful attention to whether you're perceived as an us or a them. Now, this is might be the last thing I'm going to cover, but it's very, very important. One way that brains sort, and I can't prove that every single brain on the planet does this, but they probably do, is brains develop a category of us and them. And one of the first questions that a brain is asking and continues to ask about any particular person is that person an us or are they a them? If they're a them, now this is also leads to a number of unfortunate circumstances, especially around the world. People that particularly have a tribalistic mentality, they particularly don't care about thems. One of the measures of a culture, or particularly an individual person, is how individuals care about or treat people that are thems. In America is pretty divided, and culturally there's a lot more anger these days, and so forth. So it's not as nice a place as it could be, but there is an element, or at least subculture in America, or plenty of Americans who do have more caring about people that are thems than in most other countries. I don't say that. I don't have any kind of pride. I don't associate myself as an American or not. I don't care. I don't associate with my own brain, right? I'm not going to associate that, I'm an American. I have all this. I have a goal that America's better than other places at all. I say this just to illustrate what I mean and to illustrate the effects of it. And there could easily be a few other countries out there that are even better at this. No question, right? And by the way, it makes it, interestingly enough, having diversity within a country maybe it helps with people seeing thems in a better light. It's an interesting thing. However, it actually also causes strife inside a country. It's not really an advantage in and of itself to have multiple tribes. Like, it doesn't help Iraq to have the Kurds and the Shiites and the Sunnis. It might help in some ways, but in other ways, it makes it very easy for people to do a lot of hatred and fighting and stuff like that. How people think about them. This is a little bit of a tangent, but it helps to explain what I mean here. I'll relate this to goals in a minute and achieving our goals from other people in a moment. But you'll probably find this interesting regardless. So in Russia, where I spent about nearly 5 months, about 10 years ago, because that was where my wife originally lived. In there, thems are, the people just basically could hardly care at all about thems. When people don't realize this distinction, they might go to a place and they might have family there, or for some reason be treated like an us. And they'll think that, oh, these people are so nice, they're even nicer than in America. Interestingly enough, in America, us's aren't treated as well as a lot of other countries. There's more of an extreme difference in many other countries. And again, there might be better countries than America. I just don't know every country. I live in America, so I have to use that as an example. But there's an extreme difference in some other countries, and Russia's one of them, where if you're an us, they'll do so much for you. And so it's so much about who you know. If you know somebody in a particular government agency or whatever, then you can bypass so much and so much problems. But if you don't know them, then you're treated horrifically, right? Like a real object where there's no caring whatsoever. It's pretty shocking. Having this great disparity between us's and thems, particularly not the disparity, but particularly treating thems as if they don't matter, makes it so hard for a society to function. It makes it so hard for an economy to prosper, by the way, because things that we take for granted, like credit cards, mortgages, or also the post office, just don't function in Russia very well at all. Their post office is terrible, and their and it's basically because, in my opinion, but I think I'm right about this, but I think I'm right, but I said it's my opinion as opposed to I'm certain. Then the reason for it is pretty much primarily based on their attitude towards them. So it really hurts their economy. It makes it very difficult. And there's so much theft, especially of strangers. Right? Whenever there's a chance to steal or swindle strangers, they will do, not every Russian all the time, of course, but it's much more common there. And Russians will, and interestingly enough, people that live in a culture like this, they tend to think that Americans or people that live in a culture that has less of a difference here are naive. And it's not the same as being naive. It's just society actually functions better to care about thems much more. Ideally, we would want to treat us's and thems identically and treat them all very well. Treat them all as we would treat ourselves. Actually, love them as we would love ourselves. But we don't want to treat other people. The golden rule is a horrible rule, right? We don't want to treat other people the way we want to be treated. That's ridiculously stupid and can even be illegal in many cases to treat someone as we want to be treated, right? If we, particularly sexually, right? If we want to have sex with someone, that doesn't mean, of course, so you can finish that sentence. But that I take it to the extreme just to show you how ridiculous the idea is. We don't want to treat someone like we want to be treated. We want to treat people like they want to be treated, as long as we're able to do, as long as it's something that we're willing to do and not too much of a sacrifice on our parts past what we want to sacrifice in that case. Now, the way this relates to you want someone else to do what you want, then it's very important to be an us and not a them in their mind. So you want to do things and say things and communicate and act in a way where they're going to categorize you as, again, an us, as one of them, one of their group. Now, part of that is what group is primary in their mind, right? The same person will behave differently depending on what their brain is primed with at the moment. So if someone just came out of church, then if they identify you as a Christian, you feel like more of an us at that moment. Or if you're talking about being a Christian, if someone is thinking about politics and voting, then even if you're both Christian, but one of you voted one way and one of you voted a different way for radically different candidates, then you could at that moment feel like that. So this isn't a static thing. It's something that can fluctuate based on what the person's been thinking about, and also how you present things and so on and so forth. So you want to pay attention to what you think that they're focused on in terms of a group. You can, of course, bring that out in people. Of course, if someone's making a patriotic pitch, then they first make someone really identify with America, and then they talk about how they're an American too, right? And just be careful and you can work this out for yourself and think about more and more examples where you can trigger feelings like you're a them rather than an us. And instead, you want to, of course, be an us. So that's extremely important when you're influencing someone. And remember, this is the law of implication. You want to do this implicitly, right? If you're just trying to be explicit, then quote unquote explicit communication is not very effective compared to making sure that you're implying to them what you want them to get, that they're getting the meaning, and the meaning they're getting not what you think is the meaning. All right, I'll end this video here, and I'll complete this little series about goals in the next video.